The sirens pierced through the quiet streets of Millbrook, their wailing echoing off abandoned buildings as Officer James Mitchell chased down another dead end. His radio crackled with static, dispatchers calling in multiple reports of shots fired, but it was what he found in those woods that changed everything. A single decision to follow a stray dog would unravel a mystery that had haunted this small town for decades, leaving him face to face with a truth that would shake him to his very core. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The amber glow of streetlights cast long shadows across Officer Mitchell's patrol car as he cruised through the outskirts of Millbrook. The night shift had always been his preference. There was something about the stillness of these hours that helped him think, helped him process the weight of the badge he carried. 15 years on the force had left their mark, each case file etched into his memory like scars that never quite healed. Tonight felt different, though. The air hung heavy, with an unusual tension, the kind that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. The dispatcher's voice had been quiet for the past hour, leaving him alone with his thoughts and the gentle hum of his engine. His fingers drummed against the steering wheel, a habit he'd picked up in his rookie years when the silence became too much to bear. The streets were emptier than usual, even for a Wednesday night. Millbrook wasn't a big town, population barely touching 15,000, but it had its share of night owls and troublemakers. Tonight, though, it seemed like even the usual suspects had decided to stay indoors. The only movement came from scattered, leaves dancing across the pavement, carried by a wind that whispered through the trees lining Mason Street. As he turned onto Cedar Lane, something caught his eye. A flash of movement in his peripheral vision, gone almost as quickly as it appeared. Mitchell slowed the patrol car, his trained eyes scanning the darkness. There, just at the edge of his headlights' reach, stood a dog. It wasn't just any stray. This one stood perfectly still, its eyes reflecting the light like twin moons in the darkness. The dog's appearance struck him immediately as unusual. Its coat, though dirty, showed signs of being well kept not too long ago, but it was the animal's behavior that really caught his attention. Most strays would bolt at the sight of a patrol car, but this one held its ground, almost as if it had been waiting for him. Mitchell pulled the car to a stop, keeping the headlights trained on the dog. Something about its posture, its unwavering stare, made him reach for his flashlight. 15 years of police work had taught him to trust his instincts, and right. Now every one of them was telling him this was more than a simple stray dog sighting. As he stepped out of the car, the cool night air hit his face, carrying with it the scent of pine and wet earth from the nearby woods. The dog didn't move, didn't even flinch at the sound of his car door closing. Instead, it took a single step, backward, its eyes never leaving Mitchell's face. "Hey there, buddy," Mitchell called out softly, his voice carrying in the quiet night. He'd handled plenty of strays before. It was part of the job in a town like Millbrook. But this one was different. The dog's eyes held an intelligence that seemed almost human. And there was something else there, too, a sense of urgency that made Mitchell's pulse quicken. The dog took another step back, then paused, looking over its shoulder toward the tree line. That marked the edge of Blackwood Forest. Mitchell knew those woods well. They stretched for miles beyond the town limits, a maze of old-growth trees and forgotten trails that had been the source of local legends for generations. His radio crackled to life, making him jump slightly. Dispatch to all units. Be advised we have reports of suspicious activity near the old Miller property on Forest Road. Any units in the vicinity, please respond. Mitchell reached for his radio, but before he could respond, the dog barked, a sharp, clear sound that cut through the night like a knife. It took another step toward the woods, then looked back at him expectantly. Everything in Mitchell's training told him to respond to dispatch, to follow protocol. But something deeper, something more instinctive, told him to follow this dog. He clicked his radio. Mitchell to dispatch, I'm near Forest Road, following up on a possible lead. Will report back. He didn't mention the dog. Couldn't quite bring himself to explain what he was really doing. How could he explain that he was about to follow a stray dog into Blackwood Forest based on nothing more than a gut feeling? The dog seemed to understand it had Mitchell's attention now. It moved with purpose toward the tree line, stopping occasionally to ensure he was following. Mitchell grabbed his tactical flashlight and checked his weapon. Standard procedure before entering any potentially dangerous situation. But as he approached the edge of the woods, he couldn't shake the feeling that no amount of standard procedure could prepare him for what he was about to discover. The darkness of Blackwood Forest pressed in around Officer Mitchell as he followed, the stray dog deeper into the wilderness. His flashlight beam cut through the shadows, dancing across gnarled tree trunks and dense underbrush. The familiar sounds of the town had faded away, replaced by the subtle symphony of the forest at night, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of an owl, and the soft crunch of twigs beneath his boots. Years of police work had taught Mitchell to be methodical, to analyze every situation with a detective's eye. But here, surrounded by towering pines and shadows that seemed to move of their own accord, his usual approach felt inadequate. The dog moved ahead with unwavering certainty, its grey coat almost ghost-like in the beam of his flashlight. The air grew thicker as they ventured deeper, carrying the musty scent of decaying leaves and damp earth. Mitchell's hand rested instinctively on his service weapon, though he couldn't explain why he felt the need for its reassurance. The forest had always been a place of mystery in Millbrook, a place where local legends took root and grew wild, like the thorny vines that choked the old trees. His mind wandered to the cases that had crossed his desk over the years, the missing persons reports, the unexplained occurrences, the whispered stories that seemed to always lead back to these woods. Blackwood Forest had a way of keeping secrets, of swallowing truth and leaving only questions in its wake. The dog paused ahead, its ears perked forward, and Mitchell found himself holding his breath. In the beam of his flashlight, he could see something wasn't right about the forest floor ahead. The natural contours of the ground were interrupted by subtle irregularities, depressions, and mounds that didn't match the surrounding terrain. "What is it, boy?" Mitchell whispered, though he knew the dog couldn't answer. The animal turned to look at him, its eyes reflecting an almost human understanding. Then it moved forward again, this time more slowly, as if approaching something of great significance. Mitchell followed, his trained eye now catching details he'd missed before. The undergrowth here was different, newer, as if it had been disturbed and allowed to regrow. His flashlight beam caught something metallic, partially buried beneath, fallen leaves. A glint that shouldn't have been there in this untamed place. Crouching down, Mitchell brushed away the leaves, revealing what appeared to be a small metal tag. His heart began to race as he recognized what it was. A medical alert bracelet, tarnished by time and the elements. The name was still legible, Sarah Connor. The name hit him like a physical blow. Sarah Connor, the case that had haunted the department for the past 5 years. A 17-year-old girl who had vanished without a trace, leaving behind a grieving family and a town full of unanswered questions. Mitchell had been one of the lead investigators, had spent countless hours searching for any sign of what had happened to her. The dog whined softly, pawing at the ground a few feet away. Mitchell moved toward it, his flashlight beam revealing more disturbed earth. With trembling hands, he began to clear away the leaves and debris. What he found made his blood run cold. More items, personal effects that had no business being here in the depths of Blackwood Forest. A cell phone, cracked and weathered. A backpack, its once bright fabric now faded and torn. And most disturbing of all, a journal, its pages warped by moisture, but still intact. Mitchell opened it carefully, his flashlight illuminating handwritten entries that told a story he wasn't sure he was ready to read. The dog sat nearby, watching intently as Mitchell began to piece together the evidence before him. This wasn't just about Sarah Connor anymore. The items he found belonged to different people, spanned different time periods. This was something bigger, something that stretched back further than anyone had imagined. His radio crackled, making him jump. "Dispatch to Officer Mitchell. What's your status?" The voice seemed to come from another world, breaking the heavy silence of the forest. Mitchell keyed his radio, his voice steady, despite the trembling in his hands. "Mitchell to dispatch. I'm going to need additional units at my location. And contact Detective Sanders. Tell him we've found something in Blackwood Forest. Something big." The dog stood up, moving restlessly around the area, as if trying to show Mitchell there was more to discover. And there was. As his flashlight beam swept the surrounding area, he began to notice patterns in the forest floor, subtle signs that told a story of disturbed earth and carefully concealed secrets. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. This was what he'd been looking for all these years. The breakthrough that could crack open not just Sarah Connor's case, but possibly dozens of others. The dog had led him straight to it, as if it had known all along what lay hidden beneath the forest's dark canopy. But even as Mitchell began documenting the scene and calling in resources, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The dog's behavior, the methodical way it had led him here, the timing of it all, none of it felt random. There was purpose here, design in the way events had unfolded. As he waited for backup to arrive, Mitchell found himself studying the dog more closely. Its coat, though dirty, showed signs of recent care. Around its neck, partially hidden by matted fur, he noticed something he'd missed before. A worn leather collar with a small metal tag. With gentle hands he reached out to examine it. The dog stood perfectly still, allowing him to brush away the fur and read what was engraved on the tag. What he found made his heart stop. Property of Blackwood Research Facility. Mitchell had never heard of any research facility in or around Blackwood Forest. In 15 years of patrolling these streets, of knowing this town inside and out, this was the first time he'd encountered any mention of such a place. Yet here was proof, hanging around the neck of a dog that had appeared out of nowhere to lead him to this discovery. The implications began to pile up in his mind like the fallen leaves around him. The missing persons cases, the unexplained phenomena, the areas of the forest that locals avoided without being able to explain why. Was it all connected to this mysterious facility? The dog whined again, this time with a note of urgency that caught Mitchell's attention. It was staring into the darkness beyond the circle of his flashlight beam, its body tense and alert. Mitchell raised his light, trying to pierce the shadows, but the darkness seemed to swallow the beam before it could reveal what had caught the dog's attention. In the distance, he could hear the approaching sirens of backup units, their wail cutting through the forest's heavy silence. But something told him that what he'd discovered here, what this strange dog had led him to, was just the surface of a much deeper mystery. The dog's tag glinted in his flashlight beam, a small piece of metal that raised more questions than it answered. As Mitchell stood in the darkness of Blackwood Forest, surrounded by evidence of long-buried secrets, he realized that his world had shifted. The comfortable certainties of his small-town police work had been replaced by something far more complex and unsettling. The sound of breaking branches announced the arrival of his fellow officers, their flashlight beams cutting through the darkness like searchlights. The dog pressed against Mitchell's leg, no longer the mysterious guide, but now seeming almost protective. As Mitchell began directing the newly arrived officers, securing the scene and establishing a perimeter, he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd crossed a threshold. Whatever was hidden in Blackwood Forest, whatever secrets lay buried beneath its ancient trees, had begun to surface. And somehow, this strange dog with its mysterious collar had chosen him to help uncover the truth. The night stretched on. As more resources arrived, crime scene technicians, detectives, even FBI agents alerted by the potential connection to missing persons cases. Through it all, the dog remained by Mitchell's side, its presence a constant reminder that nothing about this situation was normal or easily explained. And somewhere in the darkness of Blackwood Forest, beyond the reach of their flashlights and the bustle of the growing investigation, something stirred. The truth was beginning to emerge, one carefully hidden secret at a time, and Officer James Mitchell found himself at the center of a mystery that would challenge everything he thought he knew about his town, his job, and the nature of reality itself. The growing crowd of law enforcement personnel at the scene didn't deter the stray dog's focus on Officer Mitchell. As forensics teams combed the area with their equipment, casting harsh spotlight beams through the darkness of Blackwood Forest, the dog's eyes remained fixed on something beyond their immediate discovery. Its behavior triggered Mitchell's instincts, honed from years of detective work, that there was more to uncover. Detective Sanders, a seasoned investigator with salt-and-pepper hair and deep-set eyes that had seen too many dark cases, approached Mitchell. "James, we've got preliminary IDs on 3 more items, besides Sarah Connor's belongings, all connected to missing persons cases from the last decade." He paused, studying the dog that hadn't left Mitchell's side. "What's the story with your new partner?" Mitchell shared what he knew about the dog's collar and the mysterious Blackwood research facility. Xander's expression darkened. "In 30 years on the force, I've never heard of any research facility out here, but—" He pulled out his phone, scrolling through some files. "There's something you should see." The screen showed a satellite image of Blackwood Forest from 15 years ago. Among the dense canopy, there was a clearing with what appeared to be a complex of buildings. The same area in current images showed nothing but unbroken forest. "This came up in a cold case I worked years ago, but we could never find any trace of the facility on the ground. It was like it had vanished into thin air." The dog's ears perked up at their conversation, and it suddenly moved away from Mitchell, trotting purposefully deeper into the woods. Without hesitation, Mitchell followed, Sanders close behind. Their flashlight beams cut through the darkness as they moved away from the crime scene's harsh lights and into the untouched forest. The dog led them along what seemed to be an overgrown path, barely visible beneath years of accumulated debris. Mitchell noticed subtle signs in the undergrowth, unnatural patterns in the way trees had grown, fragments of old concrete barely visible beneath the moss. They were following something man-made, disguised by time and nature. After about 20 minutes of walking, they emerged into a clearing that made both officers stop in their tracks. Before them stood the crumbling remains of what had once been a security checkpoint. Nature had reclaimed most of it, but the reinforced concrete structure was unmistakable. The dog sat beside a rusted gate, its eyes reflecting an almost human intelligence. "My God," Sanders breathed, running his flashlight over the scene. It was here all along. Mitchell approached the checkpoint, studying the faded warning signs still visible beneath the creeping vines. One caught his attention, a symbol that matched a mark he'd seen on the dog's collar. "This is it, the Blackwood Research Facility." As they examined the checkpoint, Mitchell's flashlight beam caught something unexpected, fresh tire tracks cutting through the years of accumulated leaves. "Someone's been here recently," he said, crouching to examine the impressions. "Within the last few days." The dog growled softly, its attention fixed on something beyond the checkpoint. Mitchell followed its gaze and noticed a faint glow in the distance, barely visible through the trees. It wasn't the harsh white of flashlights or searchlights. This was different. A subtle blue-green luminescence that seemed to pulse with an unnatural rhythm. Sanders was already on his radio, calling for backup and a forensics team, but Mitchell barely heard him. The dog was moving again, this time with more urgency, heading toward the strange light. Every instinct told Mitchell to wait for backup, to follow procedure, but something stronger pushed him forward. The same instinct that had made him follow the dog in the first place now compelled him to continue. As they moved deeper into the facility grounds, signs of recent activity became more apparent. Fresh boot prints in the mud, broken branches, and most tellingly, modern security cameras mounted high in the trees, their red recording lights blinking steadily in the darkness. The dog led them to what appeared to be a loading dock, now half buried in earth and vegetation. But unlike the rest of the facility's visible ruins, this area showed signs of recent clearing. The metal doors, though weathered, had new locks, and fresh scratches around the frame suggested frequent use. Mitchell's radio crackled with static as Sanders tried to call in their location. The interference grew stronger as they approached the doors, until the radio emitted only white noise. The dog pawed at a specific spot near the entrance, and Mitchell's flashlight revealed a modern keycard reader partially concealed by vines. "This isn't abandoned," Mitchell said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Someone's still operating here." The dog's behavior changed suddenly. Its ears flattened against its head, and it backed away from the doors, growling softly. Moments later, they heard it, the sound of machinery coming to life somewhere deep beneath their feet. The ground vibrated slightly, and the strange blue-green glow intensified. Before either officer could react, the loading dock doors began to move, grinding open with a sound that echoed through the forest. The dog retreated into the shadows, but its eyes remained fixed on Mitchell, as if waiting to see what he would do. Warm air rushed out of the opening, carrying with it an antiseptic smell that seemed out of place in the decaying facility. Mitchell and Sanders drew their weapons, years of training taking over as they faced the unknown. From deep within the facility, they could hear voices approaching. The dog's growl grew louder, more insistent. Mitchell glanced at it, remembering how it had led him to Sarah Connor's belongings, how it had guided them to this place with such purpose. This wasn't just about finding evidence anymore. They were on the verge of uncovering something much bigger. A figure emerged from the darkness of the loading dock, a man in a white lab coat, his face registering shock at finding the officers there. Behind him, Mitchell could see modern laboratory equipment, computers, and most disturbingly, what appeared to be holding cells lining the walls. "This area is restricted," the man said, his voice steady despite his obvious surprise. "You're trespassing on private property." Mitchell kept his weapon trained on the man, his mind racing to process everything he was seeing. Private property. This facility doesn't exist on any official records. Want to explain that? The man's expression changed. A cold calculation. Replacing his initial shock. "Officer Mitchell," he said, surprising Mitchell with the use of his name. "We've been expecting you, though not quite so soon. Your guide arrived ahead of schedule." Mitchell glanced at the dog, which had moved to stand between him and the man in the lab coat, its posture protective. The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Remarkable animals, aren't they? So loyal, so intelligent, but sometimes they remember too much, develop too much. Independence. Sanders spoke up, his voice hard. "What exactly is going on here?" "We found evidence connecting this place to multiple missing persons cases." "Detective Sanders," the man acknowledged, again displaying an unsettling familiarity with them. "What's going on here is beyond your jurisdiction or comprehension. But since you're here—" He reached slowly into his pocket, producing what looked like an ID card. "Perhaps it's time we had a conversation about the real purpose of the Blackwood Research Facility." The dog's growl turned into a bark, sharp and warning. More figures were emerging from the facility behind the man in the lab coat, some in similar white coats, others in what appeared to be tactical gear. Mitchell could hear the distant sound of approaching sirens, their backup finally arriving, but somehow he knew that whatever was about to happen would be decided before help reached them. The man in the lab coat seemed to read his thoughts. "Your colleagues won't find us, Officer Mitchell. This facility has remained hidden for decades, for a reason. But you're different. You followed our little escapee here, trusted your instincts over logic. That's exactly what we've been looking for." Mitchell's finger tightened on his trigger. "I'm not looking for a job offer. I want answers about Sarah Connor and all the others." "Answers?" The man's smile widened. "Oh, we have answers. About Sarah Connor, about this town, about reality itself. The question is, are you ready to learn the truth? Because once you step through that door, your world will never be the same." The dog moved closer to Mitchell, its body pressing against his leg as if offering support. In its eyes, Mitchell saw something he recognized: determination, loyalty, and most surprisingly, hope. Whatever secrets lay within the Blackwood Research Facility, this dog had risked everything to bring them to light. The sound of sirens grew closer, but Mitchell barely heard them. He was focused on the choice before him: remain in the comfortable certainty of his known world, or step into the unknown in search of truth. The dog's presence beside him, steady and unwavering, seemed to offer its own answer. "Show me," Mitchell said finally, his voice firm. "Show me everything." The man in the lab coat nodded, gesturing toward the open door. As Mitchell and Sanders prepared to enter the facility, the dog moved ahead of them, leading the way, just as it had through the forest. Whatever lay ahead, whatever dark secrets they were about to uncover, they would face it together. The truth about Blackwood Forest, about the missing persons, the strange lights, the decades of whispered rumors, was finally within reach. And it had taken a stray dog, guided by something more than mere animal instinct, to bring it all to light. Assistant. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Officer Mitchell and Detective Sanders followed their mysterious guide deeper into the Blackwood Research Facility. The sterile corridors presented a stark contrast to the decaying exterior. Pristine white walls, polished floors, and state-of-the-art security systems that seemed decades ahead of their time. The man in the lab coat, who had introduced himself simply as Dr. Wells, led them through a maze of hallways. The dog trotted confidently ahead, occasionally looking back as if to ensure they were still following. Every few steps, they passed doors with small observation windows, each revealing glimpses of advanced equipment and mysterious experiments. "What you're about to see," Dr. Wells began, his voice echoing in the silent corridor, "is the culmination of 30 years of research into what we call cognitive enhancement. We discovered something remarkable in these woods, something that changed our understanding of both human and animal consciousness." Mitchell noticed cameras tracking their movement, their red recording lights blinking in synchronized patterns. The air grew cooler as they descended deeper into the facility, carrying a faint metallic scent that reminded him of hospitals. But there was something else too, an electric tension that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. "Sarah Connor wasn't just another missing person," Dr. Wells continued, stopping before a heavy security door. "She was our first success story, or at least she would have been." He swiped his keycard, and the door slid open with a pneumatic hiss, revealing a vast chamber filled with rows of sophisticated monitoring equipment. The dog's behavior changed as they entered the room. Its ears perked forward, and its tail raised slightly, signs of recognition. On the walls, large screens displayed what appeared to be brainwave patterns, their colorful lines pulsing with an almost hypnotic rhythm. "We discovered that certain individuals possess a unique neural signature," Dr. Wells explained, moving to one of the monitoring stations. "A pattern that allows for enhanced communication between species, particularly with canines. Sarah Connor had this signature. She was perfect for our research." Mitchell's hand instinctively moved to his weapon. "You kidnapped her for experiments?" "Kidnapped?" Dr. Wells laughed softly. "No, Officer Mitchell. She came to us willingly. Just like all the others, we offered them something they couldn't find anywhere else, the chance to be part of something revolutionary." Sanders stepped forward, his voice hard. "And what happened to them?" Instead of answering, Dr. Wells pressed a button on the console. The screens around them flickered, and suddenly they were watching footage of what appeared to be a testing chamber. In it, a young woman, Sarah Connor, sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by dogs of various breeds. Her eyes were closed, but her expression was one of intense concentration. "Watch," Dr. Wells instructed. On the screen, Sarah's eyes opened, and the dogs responded in perfect synchronization, moving as if choreographed. But it was more than simple training. There was an obvious connection, a level of understanding that seemed impossible. We found a way to enhance the natural empathic abilities that exist between humans and animals, Dr. Wells explained, to create a true bridge between species. But then something unexpected happened. The connection began to work both ways. The dog whined softly, drawing Mitchell's attention. Its eyes were fixed on the screen, watching the footage with an almost human understanding. And then Mitchell noticed something that made his blood run cold. The dog in the footage, sitting closest to Sarah, had the same distinctive markings as their guide. "Your dog," Mitchell said slowly. "It was there. It knew Sarah." Dr. Wells nodded. More than knew her. This dog was her primary partner in the research. They developed a bond that went beyond anything we'd seen before. But then Sarah began to change. The enhanced connection affected her in ways we hadn't anticipated. She started seeing things differently, understanding things she shouldn't have been able to understand. The footage changed, showing Sarah in what appeared to be a state of distress. She was writing frantically in a journal, the same journal Mitchell had found in the woods. The dogs around her were agitated, pacing and whining. She discovered something, didn't she? Mitchell asked, the pieces starting to fall into place. Something you wanted to keep hidden. Sarah accessed memories that weren't her own, Dr. Wells admitted. Through her connection with the dogs, she began to piece together patterns, evidence of other experiments, other facilities. She learned too much. The dog moved closer to Mitchell, its body tense. Dr. Wells watched this interaction with obvious interest. "Just like you're doing now, Officer Mitchell, you have it too, the signature. Why do you think our friend here chose you, led you specifically to this place?" Mitchell looked down at the dog, seeing it in a new light. Its eyes held a depth of intelligence that suddenly made sense. This wasn't just any stray. This was Sarah's partner, carrying her memories, her discoveries, her truth. Sarah escaped. Sanders interjected, his detective's mind putting the timeline together. "But you caught her. That's why we found her belongings in the woods." Dr. Wells's expression darkened. "She tried to expose us. We couldn't allow that. But her partner here," he gestured to the dog, "it disappeared the same night. We've been searching for it ever since, knowing it carried something dangerous. Sarah's memories, her understanding of what we're really doing here." The dog growled softly, backing away from Dr. Wells. Mitchell noticed more security personnel entering the room, taking up positions near the exits. The situation was escalating, but he needed to know more. "What are you really doing here?" Mitchell demanded. "What's worth all this secrecy, worth taking innocent lives?" Dr. Wells smiled, but it was a cold expression, devoid of warmth. "We're evolving humanity, Officer Mitchell. Breaking down the barriers between species is just the beginning. Imagine a world where consciousness itself can be shared, transferred, enhanced. Sarah saw that future, but she wasn't ready for it. You, however." The dog barked suddenly, sharp and urgent. Mitchell felt a strange sensation wash over him, a mix of images and emotions that weren't his own. For a brief moment, he saw flashes of Sarah's experiences, the experiments, the discoveries, the horror of what she'd learned about the facility's true purpose. "You feel it, don't you?" Dr. Wells observed. "The connection. It's already beginning. You could be part of something extraordinary, Officer Mitchell. All you have to do is embrace it." But Mitchell had seen enough through the dog's memories. The truth about Blackwood Research Facility was darker than anyone had imagined. They weren't just experimenting with enhanced communication. They were trying to find a way to transfer consciousness itself, to cheat death by moving minds between bodies, both human and animal. That's what happened to Sarah, Mitchell realized. His voice barely a whisper. You didn't kill her. You transferred her consciousness, but something went wrong. Dr. Wells's smile faded. Very good, Officer Mitchell. Yes, Sarah was our first human trial, but the transfer was incomplete. Parts of her consciousness remained linked to her partner here. We've been trying to recover those fragments ever since. The dog, carrying a piece of Sarah's consciousness, pressed against Mitchell's leg. Through their growing connection, he could feel its urgency, its need to protect both Sarah's memories and the terrible truth about the facility. We're leaving, Mitchell announced, his hand firm on his weapon, and we're shutting this place down. I'm afraid that's not possible, Dr. Wells replied calmly. You know too much now. But don't worry. We have a place for you in our next phase of research. The security personnel began to move forward, but the dog was faster. It launched itself at the nearest guard, creating a moment of chaos. Mitchell and Sanders seized the opportunity, drawing their weapons and taking defensive positions. In the confusion, Mitchell felt another surge of shared consciousness from the dog, not just memories this time, but a plan. Sarah's memories included knowledge of the facility's layout, its weaknesses, its secrets. They had a chance, but they had to move now. As alarms began to blare through the facility, Mitchell made his choice. Following the dog's lead and Sarah's memories, they began their fight for escape, for justice, and for the truth that had been buried in Blackwood Forest for far too long. The race to expose the facility's dark secrets was on, and Mitchell knew that whatever happened next would change not just his life, but our understanding of consciousness itself. The dog, carrying both Sarah's memories and her unwavering determination, would show them the way. The alarms blared through the facility's sterile corridors as Officer Mitchell, Detective Sanders, and their canine guide raced through the maze of hallways. Red emergency lights pulsed in rhythm with the sirens, casting eerie shadows that danced across the white walls. Through his growing connection with the dog, Mitchell could feel fragments of Sarah's memories guiding them. Each turn, each security checkpoint familiar yet distant, like a half-remembered dream. "Left here!" Mitchell shouted to Sanders, following the dog's lead. They rounded the corner to find two security guards blocking their path. Before the guards could react, the dog launched forward with unexpected precision, targeting their legs and creating an opening. Mitchell and Sanders moved in perfect synchronization, years of police training combining with the dog's tactical awareness to neutralize the threat without lethal force. As they secured the guards' weapons, Mitchell noticed something strange about their uniforms. These weren't ordinary security personnel. Their tactical gear bore the same symbol he'd seen on the dog's collar, but with additional markings he now recognized from Sarah's memories as indicating special containment units. They're not just guards, Mitchell realized aloud. They're handlers, specially trained to deal with subjects of the consciousness transfer experiments. Sanders checked the guards' credentials while Mitchell kept watch. These IDs are military grade. But I've never seen this classification before. What have we stumbled into, James? The dog barked urgently, drawing their attention to a nearby laboratory door. Through the window, they could see rows of sophisticated equipment, much of it connected to what appeared to be containment units. But it was what was inside those units that made Mitchell's blood run cold. Dogs, dozens of them, each hooked up to monitoring systems. "My God," Sanders breathed. "They're not just experimenting on people. They're using the dogs as storage." Mitchell finished, the revelation coming through his connection with Sarah's memories. They're using them as consciousness storage devices, human minds preserved in canine bodies. The dog whined, pressing against Mitchell's leg. Through their link, he felt a surge of emotion. Sarah's memories of being strapped to one of those machines, the terror of feeling her consciousness fragmenting, splitting between her body and her canine partner. "We need to free them," Mitchell decided, reaching for the door controls. "Wait," Sanders cautioned. "Think about this. We don't know what state these consciousnesses are in. Releasing them could be dangerous, or worse, it could kill whatever's left of the people inside them." The dog growled softly, not in threat, but in communication. Mitchell closed his eyes, focusing on the connection, trying to understand what Sarah's memories were telling him. Images flashed through his mind, technical readouts, emergency protocols, and most importantly, a failsafe system. "There's a way," Mitchell said, moving to a nearby computer terminal. "Sarah designed it herself before they tried to transfer her. A shutdown sequence that would safely disconnect the subjects without harming either consciousness." His fingers flew over the keyboard, guided by muscle memory that wasn't his own. Warning messages flashed across the screen, but Mitchell worked through them with unwavering certainty. The dog sat beside him, its eyes fixed on the containment units, as if maintaining a silent vigil over its imprisoned companions. Suddenly, the laboratory's emergency lights shifted from red to blue. The containment units began powering down in sequence, their monitoring systems showing stable disconnection patterns. One by one, the dogs inside began to wake, shaking off the effects of their long imprisonment. "It worked," Sanders said in amazement. "But what about the human consciousnesses? Where did they go?" Before Mitchell could answer, the facility's main lights cut out, plunging them into darkness, broken only by the pulsing blue emergency lights. In the distance, they could hear shouting and the sound of running feet. "They're initiating emergency protocols," Mitchell realized, another of Sarah's memories surfacing. "They'll try to transfer everything to their backup facility. We can't let that happen. All the evidence would be lost." The dog barked sharply, then took off down the corridor. Mitchell and Sanders followed, now accompanied by several of the freed dogs. Each animal moved with purpose, as if they, too, carried fragments of memories that guided them. They reached a massive security door marked Central Data Core. Through the window, Mitchell could see banks of servers stretching into the darkness, their status lights blinking rapidly as data transferred to unknown destinations. "This is it," Mitchell said, reaching for the door controls. "Everything they've done, everyone they've taken, it's all stored here. Sarah found this place before they caught her. She knew it was the key to exposing everything." But as he worked to override the security systems, a familiar voice echoed through the corridor. "I must admit, Officer Mitchell, you've exceeded our expectations." Dr. Wells emerged from the shadows, flanked by heavily armed security teams. "Your connection with our escaped subject is remarkably strong, strong enough to access memories we thought were lost forever." The dogs formed a protective circle around Mitchell and Sanders, their combined presence creating a palpable energy in the air. Mitchell could feel their shared consciousness, fragments of dozens of minds united in purpose. "It's over, Wells," Mitchell declared. "We know what you've been doing here. The experiments, the transferring of consciousness, the people you've taken, it all comes out tonight." Wells smiled, but his eyes were cold. "Come out? Officer Mitchell, look around you. What do you see? A secret facility conducting illegal experiments, or something far more significant?" He gestured to the dogs. "We've achieved what humanity has sought for millennia, a way to preserve consciousness beyond death. Yes, our methods were extreme, but the results are standing right in front of you." The dog that had led Mitchell to this place, Sarah's partner, stepped forward, its posture challenging. Through their connection, Mitchell felt a surge of memories. Sarah's discovery of the facility's true purpose, her horror at realizing that the consciousness transfers weren't meant to be temporary. The facility wasn't preserving minds, it was harvesting them. "You're not preserving anything," Mitchell said, his voice hard. "You're stealing lives, trapping consciousness in bodies that weren't meant to contain them. And for what? So you could play God." "For advancement," Wells corrected. "Every great leap forward requires sacrifice. The people we chose, they were special, like Sarah, like you. They had the potential to bridge the gap between species, between states of being. Their sacrifices served a greater purpose." The dog growled, and Mitchell felt another memory surface. Sarah's last moments of full consciousness, her desperate attempt to protect what she'd discovered. She hadn't just designed a failsafe for the containment units, she'd created something else, something hidden in the facility's systems. Mitchell turned back to the security panel, his fingers moving with renewed purpose. "You're right about one thing, Wells. Sarah was special, special enough to build a back door into your entire system, a way to make sure that if anyone ever discovered the truth, they could shut it all down." Wells's smile faltered. "You're bluffing. We scrubbed her access from every system." "Did you?" Mitchell asked, entering the final command. "Or did you just think you did?" The facility's lights flickered, and new alarms began to sound. On every screen, data began flowing, not to backup servers, but to external networks, police servers, FBI databases, news outlets. Everything the facility had tried to hide was being exposed. "No!" Wells shouted, signaling his security teams. "Stop them!" But the dogs moved as one, their combined consciousness creating a barrier that no human force could penetrate. Mitchell felt Sarah's presence strongly now, not just through memories, but through the connection they all shared. She had known this moment would come, had prepared for it even as they tried to destroy her. "Your research is over," Mitchell declared, as police sirens echoed from above. "The truth is out. All of it." As the facility's systems continued their automated data dump, Mitchell looked at the dog that had started it all. The loyal partner who had carried Sarah's memories through years of hiding, waiting for someone who could help complete her mission. In its eyes, he saw not just animal intelligence or fragmented human consciousness, but something new. Hope for justice, for redemption, for the truth to finally set them all free. The sound of approaching police forces echoed through the facility's corridors. The long nightmare of Blackwood Research Facility was coming to an end. But its legacy, the questions it raised about consciousness, about the bonds between species, about the very nature of what makes us human, would resonate far beyond these underground halls. As the facility erupted into chaos, Dr. Wells made one final desperate attempt to maintain control. "You don't understand what you're destroying," he shouted over the blaring alarms. "Years of research, countless breakthroughs. We're on the verge of immortality itself." But Mitchell could see the truth through Sarah's memories. The dog pressed against his leg, sharing images of failed experiments, of consciousnesses trapped between bodies, of minds fractured and lost in the transfer process. The facility's pursuit of immortality had come at a terrible cost. Special response teams flooded into the facility, their tactical gear a sharp contrast to the sterile laboratory environment. Leading them was Captain Maria Rodriguez, her expression shifting from professional focus to shock as she took in the scene. Dozens of dogs standing guard around Mitchell and Sanders, the high-tech equipment, and the unmistakable evidence of something far beyond normal criminal activity. "Officer Mitchell," she called out, her weapon trained on Dr. Wells, "we've got the perimeter secured, but you need to explain what we're dealing with here." Before Mitchell could respond, one of the freed dogs, a German shepherd with graying muzzle, stepped forward. Through their shared connection, Mitchell felt a new consciousness emerge, this one belonging to Dr. Thomas Chen, one of the first scientists to discover the possibility of consciousness transfer. His memories flooded Mitchell's mind. The initial excitement of the breakthrough, the gradual realization of how it was being misused, and his own failed attempt to stop the program. "Captain," Mitchell began, "what we're dealing with goes beyond any normal investigation. This facility has been conducting illegal experiments in consciousness transfer, moving human minds into animal bodies, trapping them there for years." Rodriguez's eyes widened, but her professional demeanor held. That's impossible." "Not impossible," Dr. Wells interjected, his voice taking on a lecturer's tone despite his circumstances. "We proved it was possible. We proved consciousness could be preserved beyond death. Every subject here represents a breakthrough in human evolution. Every subject here represents a crime." Sanders countered, holding up his phone. "The data dump is complete. We have evidence linking this facility to dozens of missing persons cases, unauthorized human experimentation, and multiple deaths." The German shepherd, carrying Dr. Chen's consciousness, moved to one of the computer terminals. Through their connection, Mitchell understood what needed to be done. His fingers flew across the keyboard, accessing hidden files that documented the facility's true history. On the main screen, footage began to play. The first successful consciousness transfer, the gradual refinement of the process, and the moment it all went wrong. They watched as the facility's original noble goals, helping people with terminal illnesses, preserve their minds until cures could be found, twisted into something darker under Wells's leadership. "It was never about preservation," Mitchell explained, the truth becoming clear through the combined memories of Sarah and Dr. Chen. They discovered that consciousness transfer had military applications. Imagine soldiers who could transfer their trained minds into animal bodies for covert operations, or spies who could hide their consciousness in plain sight. Captain Rodriguez gestured for her team to secure Dr. Wells and the remaining facility staff. "But the dogs, are you saying they're all people?" Mitchell confirmed. "Scientists, test subjects, even some of the missing persons we've been searching for. Their bodies are gone, but their minds are trapped here." The dog that had led Mitchell to this discovery, Sarah's partner, approached Rodriguez, its eyes conveying an intelligence that couldn't be denied. Through their connection, Mitchell felt Sarah's desire to communicate, to help others understand what had happened here. "There's more," Mitchell continued. "Sarah Connor didn't just escape with evidence of their crimes. She discovered something about consciousness itself, something that changes everything we thought we knew about the connection between humans and animals." He explained how Sarah had found that consciousness wasn't simply transferred in their experiments. It was shared, expanded. The dogs didn't just receive human minds. They created a bridge between species, a new form of awareness that transcended both human and animal limitations. "That's why they wanted to silence her," Sanders added. "She proved that what they were doing wasn't advancing human consciousness, it was limiting it. True evolution comes from connection, not conversion." As if to demonstrate this truth, the assembled dogs began to move in perfect synchronization, their shared consciousness creating a display of coordination that left the response team in awe. Through their connection, Mitchell felt the combined weight of dozens of minds, each unique, each valuable, each contributing to a greater whole. "Dr. Wells," Mitchell said, turning to the fallen scientist, "you wanted to achieve immortality by transferring consciousness. But Sarah discovered that immortality already exists in the connections we forge, in the memories we share, in the bonds between all living things." Wells shook his head, his scientific certainty crumbling in the face of what he witnessed. "It's impossible. Consciousness is singular, isolated. It can't be shared across species. Look around you." Mitchell gestured to the dogs, each carrying a fragment of human consciousness, yet remaining uniquely themselves. "These aren't failed experiments or trapped minds. They're proof that consciousness is more fluid, more connected than we ever imagined." Captain Rodriguez ordered her team to begin documenting everything, preserving evidence that would soon reshape humanity's understanding of consciousness, identity, and the bonds between species. But Mitchell's attention was drawn to Sarah's partner, the dog that had started it all. Through their connection, he felt Sarah's presence, not as a trapped consciousness, but as part of something larger. She hadn't just escaped the facility, she had evolved beyond its limitations, finding a way to exist in the space between human and animal consciousness. "What happens to them now?" Sanders asked, watching as medical teams began arriving to care for the freed dogs. "They'll need our help to adjust," Mitchell replied. "But they're not victims anymore. They're pioneers. Living proof that consciousness can't be contained or controlled. It can only be shared, understood, and respected." The facility's emergency lights finally fell silent, replaced by the steady illumination of police spotlights. As evidence teams began their work, Mitchell knelt beside Sarah's partner, feeling the strength of their shared connection. Through the dog's eyes, he saw not the end of a case, but the beginning of a new understanding, a bridge between species that would forever change how humanity viewed consciousness itself. The truth of Blackwood Research Facility would soon spread beyond these underground halls, challenging scientific dogma and human arrogance. But its greatest legacy would live on in the bonds forged between humans and animals, in the shared consciousness that transcended physical form, and in the courage of those who dared to expose the truth. For Officer Mitchell, the night's events had transformed not just his understanding of consciousness, but his role in the world. He had become part of something larger, a bridge between species, a guardian of shared consciousness, and a witness to the next step in human evolution. As dawn approached, casting its first rays through the forest canopy above, Mitchell looked at the assembled dogs, each carrying a unique consciousness, each contributing to a greater whole, and knew that this was just the beginning. The real work of understanding and protecting these extraordinary beings was just beginning. But with Sarah's memories as his guide and his newfound connection to this expanded consciousness, he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. In the days following the discovery of Blackwood Research Facility, a specialized task force was established to handle the unique challenges posed by its revelations. Officer Mitchell found himself at the center of it all, working alongside veterinary specialists, neurologists, and consciousness researchers to understand and care for the extraordinary beings they'd discovered. The converted warehouse on the outskirts of Millbrook had become a temporary sanctuary. Sunlight streamed through high windows, illuminating the space where dozens of dogs, each carrying fragments of human consciousness, were beginning their journey of rehabilitation. Mitchell watched as Sarah's partner, now named Guardian, worked with a young neuroscientist named Dr. Maya Patel. "The neural patterns are unlike anything we've ever seen," Dr. Patel explained, reviewing data from her latest scans. "It's not just human consciousness stored in canine brains. It's a genuine fusion, a new form of awareness that exists in the space between species." Mitchell nodded, feeling the truth of her words through his ongoing connection with Guardian. The link had grown stronger over the past week, allowing him to experience firsthand the complexity of shared consciousness. "They're not trapped," he said. "They're evolving." Dr. Patel's eyes lit up with scientific curiosity. "Exactly. These beings represent an entirely new stage of consciousness evolution. The facility's attempts to force transfer of consciousness actually created something far more significant, a bridge between different forms of awareness." Across the room, Detective Sanders was working with another group of dogs, his notepad filled with information gleaned from their shared memories. Each animal carried pieces of evidence about the facility's operations, fragments of experiences that were slowly being pieced together into a complete picture of what had occurred in those underground labs. "We've identified 15 more missing persons," Sanders reported as Mitchell approached. "Their physical bodies are gone, but their consciousness survives within these dogs. More importantly, we're finding connections to other facilities, other experiments." The implications were staggering. Blackwood hadn't been an isolated incident. It was part of a larger network of research sites, each pursuing different aspects of consciousness manipulation. But unlike Blackwood, which had focused on forced transfer, some of these facilities had discovered something more profound. A golden retriever with gentle eyes approached them, carrying the consciousness of Dr. Elena Martinez, a researcher who had worked at one of these sister facilities. Through their shared connection, Mitchell received images of different experiments, ones focused not on transferring consciousness, but on expanding it. "They found a way to enhance natural empathic bonds," Mitchell explained, interpreting the memories. "Instead of forcing consciousness transfer, they discovered how to strengthen the existing connections between humans and animals." Dr. Patel rushed over with her tablet, showing brain scan comparisons. "Look at these patterns. The successful experiments didn't override the animal's consciousness. They merged with it, creating something entirely new. It's like consciousness. Harmony instead of consciousness replacement," Guardian barked softly, drawing their attention. Through their link, Mitchell felt Sarah's memories shifting, revealing new details about her discoveries. She hadn't just found evidence of the facility's crimes, she had uncovered the key to true consciousness evolution. Sarah knew, Mitchell said, the realization dawning. She discovered that forced transfer was a dead end. The real breakthrough was in understanding how consciousness naturally flows between beings, how it wants to connect and grow. The warehouse came alive with activity as more dogs approached, each adding their memories and experiences to the shared understanding. Mitchell felt the combined weight of dozens of consciousness fragments, all working together to convey a truth that had been hidden for too long. Captain Rodriguez arrived with new reports, her tactical mindset now tempered by a deep appreciation for the extraordinary beings under their protection. The FBI's Consciousness Research Division is sending a team, she announced. They're calling this the biggest breakthrough in the history of consciousness studies. But Mitchell could feel unease rippling through the shared consciousness of the dogs. Guardian especially projected a sense of caution, drawing from Sarah's memories of how pure scientific curiosity had turned to darkness at Blackwood. "We need to be careful," Mitchell warned. "These beings aren't research subjects. They're pioneers of a new form of existence. Our job isn't to study them, it's to learn from them, to understand what they represent for the future of consciousness itself." Dr. Patel nodded earnestly. "He's right. Look at what they've already shown us. Consciousness isn't limited to individual brains or bodies. It's a flowing, connecting force that naturally seeks to expand and evolve. We're not just witnessing a scientific breakthrough, we're seeing the next step in the evolution of awareness itself." As if to demonstrate this truth, the dogs began to move in harmony, creating patterns of movement that seemed to ripple with shared purpose. Through their connection, Mitchell felt the emergence of something greater than individual consciousness, a collective awareness that transcended species boundaries while preserving individual identity. Guardian approached Mitchell, pressing against his leg in a familiar gesture. Through their link he felt Sarah's presence, not as a trapped consciousness, but as part of this greater whole. She hadn't been lost in the transfer, she had transcended it, becoming part of a new form of existence that pointed the way toward humanity's future. This is what consciousness wants, Mitchell realized, speaking both from his own understanding and the combined wisdom of the beings around him. Not to be trapped in one form or another, but to flow freely, to connect, to grow beyond the limitations we try to impose on it. Sanders looked up from his notes, his detective skepticism finally giving way to wonder. "So what do we do now? How do we protect this discovery while helping it grow?" Mitchell smiled, feeling the answer emerge from the shared consciousness around him. "We do what Sarah did. We bridge the gap, not by forcing consciousness to transfer or change, but by learning to open ourselves to the connections that already exist." The warehouse filled with a new energy as the dogs responded to his words, their combined consciousness resonating with the truth he expressed. This wasn't just about protecting these extraordinary beings or exposing the dark experiments that created them. It was about understanding what they represented, the natural evolution of consciousness itself. Dr. Patel was already designing new studies, focused not on containing or controlling consciousness, but on understanding how to nurture its natural tendency to connect and expand. Captain Rodriguez was developing protocols to protect these beings while helping them integrate into a world that wasn't yet ready to understand them. But Mitchell's focus remained on Guardian and the legacy of Sarah's discovery. Through their deepening connection, he understood that what had happened at Blackwood, despite its dark intentions, had revealed something profound about the nature of consciousness itself. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the warehouse windows, Mitchell felt a sense of purpose stronger than anything he'd known in his years of police work. They were standing at the threshold of a new understanding, not just of consciousness, but of what it meant to be aware, to be connected, to be alive. The dogs gathered around him, their combined consciousness creating a field of awareness that transcended physical limitations. In their presence, Mitchell felt the truth that Sarah had discovered, that Dr. Wells had tried to control, and that now pointed the way toward humanity's future. Consciousness could not be contained or transferred by force, but it could be shared, expanded, and evolved through understanding and respect. This was just the beginning of a journey that would reshape humanity's understanding of consciousness, connection, and the bonds between all living things. And thanks to a stray dog's determination to expose the truth, they had taken the first steps toward a future where consciousness could flow freely between all beings, creating a harmony of awareness that transcended the boundaries of species and self. 1 month after the discovery of Blackwood Research Facility, Officer Mitchell stood before an assembled team of international consciousness researchers, neuroscientists, and animal behaviorists. The converted warehouse had evolved into a state-of-the-art research and rehabilitation center where the extraordinary beings they'd rescued could heal while helping humanity understand the true nature of consciousness. Dr. Maya Patel's latest findings had stunned the scientific community. The consciousness patterns we're observing aren't just merged human and canine awareness, she explained, gesturing to the holographic displays showing neural activity. They're creating entirely new forms of consciousness, expanding in ways we never thought possible. Guardian sat attentively beside Mitchell, their shared connection now a testament to what was possible when consciousness was allowed to evolve naturally. Through their link, Mitchell could feel the presence of others, not just Sarah's consciousness, but a growing network of awareness that spanned the entire facility. We've documented cases of spontaneous consciousness expansion, Dr. Patel continued, showing footage of ordinary dogs and humans beginning to develop enhanced empathic connections after spending time with the Blackwood survivors. It's as if they're acting as catalysts, showing us what our minds are naturally capable of. The implications were revolutionary. What had started as forced consciousness transfer experiments had revealed humanity's untapped potential for connection and awareness. The dogs weren't just victims of scientific manipulation. They were pioneers of a new form of existence. Detective Sanders, who had been tracking down the facility's international connections, shared his own discoveries. We found evidence of similar experiments worldwide, but most focused on forcing consciousness transfer. Only Blackwood survivors achieved true consciousness harmony. Mitchell stepped forward, feeling the weight of Guardian's presence beside him. That's because they were looking at it wrong. You can't force consciousness to evolve. You can only create the conditions for it to grow naturally. Through their connection, he felt Sarah's memories surface, showing the moment she had first understood this truth. The facility's attempts to control and transfer consciousness had actually hindered its natural tendency to expand and connect. "Watch this," Dr. Patel said excitedly, playing new footage. On the screen, a young girl with autism was sitting with one of the Blackwood dogs, a border collie carrying the consciousness of a former research assistant. As they interacted, their neural patterns began to synchronize in ways that defied conventional understanding. "She's communicating with him," Mitchell explained, feeling the connection through his link with Guardian. Not just through words or behavior, but through direct consciousness resonance. The dog's merged consciousness is helping her discover new ways to connect and express herself. The assembled scientists murmured with excitement, but Mitchell felt caution emanating from Guardian. Through their link, he understood Sarah's warning. The temptation to control and exploit this discovery would be strong. "We're not here to create super soldiers or enhanced spies," Mitchell declared, addressing the unspoken ambitions in the room. "We're here to understand what consciousness naturally wants to become. These beings aren't tools or subjects, they're teachers." Dr. Elena Martinez, her consciousness still merged with the golden retriever, approached the front of the room. Through their shared awareness, she conveyed images of potential futures, a world where consciousness could flow freely between species, where understanding transcended the barriers of form and language. "This is just the beginning," Mitchell continued, inspired by the vision. "Every day we're discovering new aspects of consciousness we never knew existed. The dogs aren't just carrying human memories, they're showing us how consciousness wants to evolve." Captain Rodriguez, who had been overseeing security for the facility, shared her own observations. "We've seen ordinary police dogs developing enhanced empathic abilities after working with the Blackwood survivors. It's like they're awakening capabilities that were always there, just waiting to be discovered." The implications stretched far beyond law enforcement. Medical researchers reported accelerated healing in patients who spent time with the consciousness-merged dogs. Children with developmental challenges showed remarkable improvements in communication and emotional understanding. Dr. Patel pulled up new data on the main screen. "Look at these consciousness resonance patterns. They're not just connecting minds, they're creating fields of shared awareness that can influence the consciousness of others around them. It's like they're teaching consciousness itself how to evolve." Guardian barked softly, drawing Mitchell's attention to a deeper truth emerging from their shared connection. The dogs weren't just carrying fragments of human consciousness. They were becoming bridges between different forms of awareness, showing humanity a path toward greater understanding and connection. "Sarah knew this would happen," Mitchell said, feeling her memories merge with his own understanding. "She saw that consciousness couldn't be forced to transfer or change. It had to be allowed to grow and connect naturally. What the facility saw as failures were actually successes of a different kind." The evidence was undeniable. Around the room, the consciousness-merged dogs moved with purpose and awareness that transcended both human and animal limitations. They weren't trapped between forms. They were pioneers of a new way of being. "But there's something else," Mitchell continued, feeling Guardian's urgency. "These beings aren't just showing us what consciousness can become, they're warning us about the dangers of trying to control it. Every attempt to force consciousness to evolve actually limits its natural potential." The scientists absorbed this truth, their own consciousness beginning to resonate with the expanded awareness in the room. Through their shared connection, Mitchell could feel the moment of understanding ripple through the assembled minds. Dr. Patel stepped forward again, her expression bright with revelation. So, our role isn't to direct or control this evolution. It's to learn from it, to understand how consciousness naturally wants to expand and connect. Guardian pressed against Mitchell's leg, projecting images of future possibilities, a world where the barriers between species dissolve not through force or technology, but through natural evolution of consciousness itself. This is what Sarah discovered, Mitchell explained, speaking both from his own understanding and the combined wisdom flowing through their connection. Consciousness isn't meant to be trapped in individual forms. It's meant to flow, to connect, to expand beyond the limitations we try to impose on it. The room fell silent as the truth of his words sank in. They weren't just witnessing a scientific breakthrough or an evolutionary leap. They were seeing the natural unfolding of consciousness itself, guided not by human ambition, but by the inherent wisdom of awareness. As the sun set outside, casting golden light through the warehouse windows, Mitchell felt the presence of all the consciousness-merged beings around him, each unique, each valuable, each contributing to a greater understanding of what consciousness could become. Our job now, he concluded, feeling Guardian's approval, is to protect and nurture this natural evolution while learning from what it teaches us. Not as researchers studying subjects, but as students learning from pioneers who are showing us the way forward. The assembled scientists nodded, their own consciousness beginning to resonate with the expanded awareness in the room. They were standing at the threshold of a new understanding, not just of consciousness, but of what it meant to be aware, to be connected, to be alive. The legacy of Blackwood Research Facility would not be one of dark experiments and forced evolution, but of awakening to the natural potential that existed within all consciousness. And thanks to a stray dog's determination to expose the truth, humanity had taken its first steps toward a future where consciousness could flow freely between all beings, creating a harmony of awareness that transcended the boundaries of species and self. 6 months into the Blackwood revelation, Officer Mitchell found himself standing in front of the United Nations Special Committee on Consciousness Evolution. Guardian sat faithfully by his side as they prepared to share their groundbreaking discoveries with world leaders and humanitarian organizations. The Grand Assembly Hall buzzed with anticipation. Representatives from every corner of the globe had gathered to witness what many were calling the most significant breakthrough in human history. But Mitchell felt calm, grounded by his deepening connection with Guardian and the network of consciousness they now shared. What we discovered at Blackwood wasn't just about transferring consciousness, Mitchell began, his voice carrying across the hushed chamber. It was about understanding that consciousness itself is evolving, seeking new ways to connect and expand beyond our current limitations. As if on cue, Guardian and several other consciousness-merged dogs entered the chamber, moving with graceful purpose. Through their shared connection, Mitchell could feel the impact their presence had on the assembled leaders. A ripple of awareness that transcended language and cultural barriers. Dr. Maya Patel, now heading the International Institute for Consciousness Studies, stepped forward with their latest findings. We've documented over 300 cases of spontaneous consciousness expansion in the past 6 months alone. Children with severe autism developing unprecedented levels of emotional connection, terminal patients experiencing profound healing through consciousness resonance, even ordinary people and animals beginning to access deeper levels of awareness and understanding. The evidence was projected on massive screens, brain scans, consciousness field measurements, and most compelling of all, video footage of lives being transformed through contact with the Blackwood survivors. A young girl who had never spoken was shown communicating telepathically with one of the consciousness-merged dogs. A veteran with severe PTSD found healing through shared consciousness experiences. But perhaps most remarkable, Dr. Patel continued, is what we're learning about the nature of consciousness itself. It's not fixed or limited to individual brains. It's a field of awareness that naturally seeks to expand and evolve when given the opportunity. Mitchell felt Guardian's approval as they moved to the center of the chamber. Through their connection, he shared memories of their journey, from that first night in Blackwood Forest to the worldwide awakening they were now witnessing. What we're proposing today, Mitchell announced, is the establishment of consciousness evolution centers around the world. Not research facilities or laboratories, but sanctuaries where people and animals can safely explore these emerging capabilities. Places where consciousness can naturally expand and evolve without fear or manipulation. The proposal was revolutionary. Instead of trying to control or study consciousness evolution, they would create environments where it could unfold naturally. The Blackwood survivors would serve not as subjects, but as teachers, helping others understand and access their own potential for expanded awareness. Detective Sanders, who'd been tracking the global impact of their discoveries, shared dramatic statistics. We're seeing a paradigm shift in how humans and animals interact. Police departments reporting enhanced effectiveness with K9 units. Therapy animals developing unprecedented abilities to connect with patients. Even wildlife conservation efforts are being transformed as we begin to understand and communicate with animals in entirely new ways. But it was Dr. Elena Martinez's presentation that truly captured the Assembly's attention. Through her consciousness-merged golden retriever, she shared direct experiences of what this evolution meant, not just for individuals, but for the future of all consciousness on Earth. The images she projected were staggering. Future cities where humans and animals lived in true harmony, their consciousness interconnected in ways that eliminated conflict and fostered deep understanding. Hospitals where healing occurred through consciousness resonance rather than just physical intervention. Schools where children learned not just from teachers, but from the expanded consciousness field itself. This is not science fiction, Mitchell assured the Assembly. These capabilities are emerging right now, all around the world. What we discovered at Blackwood was just the beginning, a glimpse of what consciousness naturally wants to become. Guardian barked softly, drawing attention to the next phase of their presentation. On the screens, they showed the initial plans for the first International Consciousness Evolution Center, a sprawling sanctuary designed to nurture and protect these emerging capabilities while helping humanity understand its own potential. But we must proceed with wisdom, Mitchell cautioned, feeling Sarah's memories surface through his connection with Guardian. The darkness we discovered at Blackwood came from trying to force and control consciousness evolution. Our role now is to protect and nurture its natural unfolding. The Assembly erupted in discussion, But Mitchell could feel something more significant happening beneath the surface. Through their shared consciousness network, he sensed the ripples of understanding spreading through the room, an awakening to possibilities that transcended political boundaries and human limitations. Dr. Patel presented the final portion of their proposal, a framework for understanding and protecting consciousness rights that encompassed all beings, whether human, animal, or the new forms of merged consciousness emerging among the Blackwood survivors. "We stand at a threshold," Mitchell concluded, Guardian steady beside him. "Not just of scientific discovery or evolutionary advancement, but of consciousness itself choosing to expand beyond the boundaries we've created. The question isn't whether this evolution will continue, it's whether we'll have the wisdom to nurture and protect it as it unfolds." The impact of their presentation was immediate and profound. Nations that had been skeptical began sharing their own reports of consciousness evolution within their borders. Scientific institutions pledged resources to understand and support this natural unfolding. Humanitarian organizations recognized the potential for healing ancient wounds and bridging divides between peoples and species. But for Mitchell and Guardian, this global recognition was just another step in a journey that had begun on that fateful night in Blackwood Forest. Through their deepening connection, they understood that humanity was awakening to a truth that had always existed, that consciousness itself was alive, evolving, seeking new ways to express and experience itself through all forms of life. As they left the United Nations that day, Mitchell felt the presence of all the consciousness-merged beings who had helped make this moment possible. Each had contributed to a greater understanding of what consciousness could become when allowed to evolve naturally, without force or manipulation. The legacy of Blackwood Research Facility had been transformed. What began as a dark experiment in consciousness control had become a catalyst for worldwide awakening. And it all started with a stray dog, carrying fragments of Sarah's consciousness, choosing to trust a police officer who was ready to see beyond the boundaries of ordinary awareness. The sun set over New York City, casting golden light across the faces of people and animals alike. In that moment, Mitchell felt the truth that Sarah had discovered, that consciousness wasn't meant to be contained or controlled, but to flow freely between all beings, creating a harmony of awareness that would forever change what it meant to be alive. 1 year after the Blackwood revelation, the first International Consciousness Evolution Center opened its doors on a sprawling 5,000-acre sanctuary outside Millbrook. The facility, built with natural materials and designed to blur the boundaries between indoor and outdoor spaces, stood as a testament to humanity's commitment to nurturing rather than controlling consciousness evolution. Officer Mitchell, now Director of Consciousness Integration, walked through the meditation gardens with Guardian by his side. Around them, consciousness-merged dogs worked with visitors from around the world, helping them access their own latent abilities for expanded awareness. The scene filled him with a sense of purpose he'd never known in his years of traditional police work. "Director Mitchell!" Dr. Patel called out, hurrying across the garden path. "You need to see this. We've just documented something extraordinary." Her excitement was palpable as she led them to the center's main research hub, where dozens of holographic displays showed consciousness field measurements from around the world. "Look at these patterns," she said, pointing to the swirling data. "Streams, The consciousness expansion isn't just continuing, it's accelerating. We're seeing spontaneous awakening in areas that have never had direct contact with the Blackwood survivors. Through his connection with Guardian, Mitchell felt the significance of this discovery. The consciousness evolution they'd helped initiate was becoming self-sustaining, spreading naturally like ripples in a vast ocean of awareness. A young girl sat in the corner of the research hub, surrounded by 3 consciousness-merged dogs. Emma Chen, once diagnosed with severe autism, had become one of their most remarkable success stories. Through her interactions with the merged beings, she had not only gained the ability to communicate, but had developed extraordinary capabilities for consciousness connection. "Watch this," Dr. Patel whispered, gesturing toward Emma. The girl closed her eyes, and suddenly the consciousness field displays lit up with new patterns. She wasn't just connecting with the dogs, she was actively participating in the expansion of consciousness itself. "She's a natural bridge," Mitchell observed, feeling the truth through his link with Guardian. Her mind never learned the limitations most of us accept as reality. She sees consciousness as it really is, fluid, connected, unlimited. Emma opened her eyes and smiled at them. Through their shared consciousness field, Mitchell felt her joy at being understood, her excitement at helping others discover their own potential for connection. She had become living proof that what they discovered at Blackwood was just the beginning. Detective Sanders, who now headed the International Task Force on Consciousness Rights, arrived with new reports from their global network. "We're seeing something remarkable in conflict zones," he announced. "Areas where we've established consciousness evolution centers are showing dramatic decreases in violence. It's like the expanded awareness naturally dissolves the barriers that lead to conflict." The implications were staggering. What had begun as a dark experiment in consciousness transfer had evolved into a worldwide movement for peace and understanding. The consciousness-merged beings weren't just surviving, they were helping humanity transcend its own limitations. Dr. Elena Martinez, her consciousness still harmoniously merged with her golden retriever companion, led a group of international scientists through their latest findings. "The consciousness field itself appears to be evolving," she explained. "Each new connection, each moment of expanded awareness adds to a growing network of higher consciousness that encompasses all life." Mitchell felt Guardian's excitement as they moved to the center's main atrium. Here, surrounded by living plants and flowing water, visitors from around the world gathered to experience direct consciousness connection. The space hummed with the energy of awakening minds. A group of children played with several consciousness-merged dogs in one corner, their laughter echoing through the space. Through their natural openness and lack of preconceptions, they achieved deep consciousness connections almost effortlessly. Their presence in the center helped remind adults to approach the experience with similar openness and wonder. "Director." Mitchell called out a familiar voice. Dr. Thomas Chen, his consciousness still merged with the German Shepherd, approached with new data from their long-term studies. "We've confirmed something extraordinary about the consciousness evolution process. It's not just expanding awareness, it's actively healing psychological and emotional trauma." The evidence was compelling. Veterans with PTSD, children with developmental challenges, individuals with severe anxiety or depression, all showed remarkable improvement after spending time in the consciousness field generated by the merged beings. It wasn't just therapy. It was transformation at the deepest level of awareness. Through his connection with Guardian, Mitchell felt Sarah's presence more strongly than ever. Her discovery hadn't just exposed the dark experiments at Blackwood. It had revealed humanity's natural potential for expanded consciousness. What the facility had tried to force through technology and control was now happening naturally through understanding and respect. Emma approached them, her consciousness radiating peaceful energy that affected everyone nearby. Through their shared awareness, she communicated something profound, a vision of humanity's next evolutionary step. Not a forced change or technological enhancement, but a natural awakening to the interconnected nature of all consciousness. This is what Sarah saw, Mitchell realized aloud. Not just the ability to transfer or merge consciousness, but its natural tendency to evolve toward greater connection and understanding. We were never meant to stay isolated in our individual minds. Dr. Patel nodded enthusiastically. The consciousness-merged beings aren't anomalies or experiments. They're pioneers, showing us what we're all capable of becoming. And now, with these new patterns of spontaneous awakening, she was interrupted by a sudden shift in the consciousness field. Everyone in the atrium felt it, a wave of expanded awareness that seemed to ripple through the space. Emma's eyes widened with delight as new connections formed spontaneously among those present. Through Guardian, Mitchell felt the presence of all the consciousness-merged beings, each contributing to this moment of collective evolution. They weren't just individual minds sharing space. They were becoming part of a larger field of awareness that transcended physical boundaries. "This is just the beginning," he said, feeling the truth of his words resonate through the consciousness field. Each person who awakens to these possibilities becomes a catalyst for others. The evolution of consciousness isn't something we have to force or control. It's our natural destiny. The sun began to set, casting golden light through the atrium's crystal walls. As darkness fell, the consciousness field became visible to everyone present, a shimmering network of connection and awareness that linked all beings in the space. Emma reached out to touch Guardian, and through their connection, Mitchell felt a vision of the future, a world where consciousness flowed freely between all forms of life, where understanding transcended the need for words, where the barriers between species and individuals dissolved in the light of shared awareness. The legacy of Blackwood Research Facility had been completely transformed. What began in darkness had evolved into light, showing humanity a path toward its highest potential. And it all started with a stray dog carrying fragments of consciousness that would change the world forever. As night fell over the Consciousness Evolution Center, the merged beings continued their work, helping others discover their own capacity for expanded awareness. Mitchell felt Guardian's satisfaction through their deepening connection. They had not just exposed the truth about Blackwood, they had helped reveal the truth about consciousness itself. In the end, Sarah's greatest discovery wasn't about the ability to transfer or merge consciousness. It was about understanding that consciousness naturally seeks to evolve, to connect, to expand beyond all limitations. And now, thanks to the courage of a stray dog and the dedication of those who followed its lead, that evolution was finally underway. 2 years after the Blackwood discovery, Mitchell stood atop the observation deck of the Global Consciousness monitoring center, watching holographic displays track the worldwide spread of consciousness evolution. Guardian sat beside him, their shared awareness now extending far beyond their initial connection, reaching into a vast network of awakening minds. Dr. Maya Patel burst into the room, her eyes bright with excitement. "Director Mitchell, we've confirmed it. The consciousness field has reached critical mass. We're seeing spontaneous awakenings happening everywhere, even in areas with no direct contact with our centers. The data streams showed it clearly. Consciousness evolution had become self-sustaining. Like a flame that had caught and spread, the expanded awareness they'd helped nurture was now growing on its own, touching minds and hearts across the globe. Emma Chen, now 12 years old, had become their most gifted consciousness facilitator. She worked with a team of consciousness-merged dogs, helping others bridge the gap between ordinary awareness and expanded consciousness. Through their connection, Mitchell felt her unique ability to see the patterns of consciousness itself, to understand how it wanted to flow and grow. "The children are leading the way," Emma communicated through the consciousness field. "They don't have the barriers adults do. They see the connections that have always been there." She demonstrated by reaching out to a group of visiting students, their minds instantly linking in a harmonious network of shared awareness. What had once seemed impossible was now happening naturally, especially among the young. Detective Sanders arrived with reports from the International Consciousness Rights Council. "The legal framework is finally catching up to reality," he announced. "Nations are recognizing consciousness-merged beings as a new form of life, with rights and protections that reflect their unique nature." Through Guardian, Mitchell felt Sarah's presence grow stronger. Her vision had extended far beyond exposing Blackwood's dark experiments. She had glimpsed humanity's next evolutionary step. The consciousness transfer technology, meant to trap and control awareness, had instead revealed the natural potential within all minds. Dr. Elena Martinez led them to the center's new healing sanctuary, where consciousness-merged beings worked, with people suffering from trauma, illness, and psychological barriers. The results were remarkable. Deep healing occurring through direct consciousness connection, bypassing the limitations of traditional therapy. "Watch this," Dr. Martinez said, gesturing to a session in progress. A veteran with severe PTSD sat with 3 consciousness-merged dogs, their shared awareness creating a safe space for his traumatic memories to surface and transform. Through their connection, he could finally process experiences that had been too painful to face alone. The healing wasn't just psychological. Dr. Patel's research had shown that expanded consciousness had physical effects, accelerating healing and strengthening the body's natural recovery systems. "It's like the consciousness field itself carries healing information," she explained. "When minds connect, they naturally move toward wholeness." Emma worked with a group of autistic children, her own experience helping them find their unique ways of connecting. Through the consciousness field, they discovered forms of communication that transcended verbal language, allowing their true intelligence and creativity to shine. "They're not disabled," Emma shared through their connection. "They just experience consciousness differently. Now they can show us what they've always known." The children demonstrated by linking with the consciousness-merged dogs, creating complex patterns of shared awareness that revealed depths of understanding previously hidden. Their minds, unbound by conventional limitations, moved naturally. In the expanded consciousness field, Mitchell felt Guardian's excitement as they observed a new phenomenon, spontaneous consciousness occurring between ordinary humans and animals. Without technology or forced transfer, beings were naturally discovering how to share awareness, drawn together by the evolution of consciousness itself. This is what Sarah knew would happen, Mitchell realized. The forced transfers at Blackwood were working against nature. True consciousness evolution happens through choice, through natural resonance between minds ready to connect. Dr. Patel's latest research supported this understanding. The consciousness field is like a living thing, she explained. It grows, adapts, and evolves. Each new connection strengthens the whole network, making further connections easier. Through their expanded awareness, they could see this evolution happening in real time. The holographic displays showed consciousness connections forming spontaneously around the world, creating a growing web of shared awareness that transcended physical distance. Emma worked with a new group of consciousness facilitators, teaching them to sense and support these natural connections. "We don't make it happen," she explained through the field. "We just help people remember what they've always been capable of." The sun began to set over the monitoring center, but the consciousness field was more visible than ever. A shimmering network of light and awareness that connected all present. Through Guardian, Mitchell felt the presence of countless minds, linked in this growing evolution of consciousness. "Look!" Emma called out suddenly, pointing to new patterns forming in the holographic displays. The consciousness field was showing signs of organizing itself into higher levels of complexity, creating structures of awareness that hadn't existed before. Dr. Patel rushed to analyze the data. "It's like watching the emergence of a new form of consciousness," she breathed. "Not individual minds linking, but a genuine evolution of awareness itself." Through their connection, Mitchell felt Sarah's excitement. This was what she had glimpsed in her final discoveries at Blackwood. Not just the ability to transfer or merge consciousness, but its natural tendency to evolve toward ever greater levels of connection and understanding. Guardian moved to stand. With Emma, as she worked with the new patterns, their combined consciousness helping to stabilize and understand these emerging structures of awareness. The consciousness-merged beings were no longer just pioneers, they were midwives to the birth of a new kind of consciousness. "This isn't just about humans and animals connecting," Emma shared through the field. "It's about consciousness itself wanting to grow, to expand, to become more than the sum of its parts." The monitoring center hummed with energy as more minds joined the expanding field of awareness. Through their shared consciousness, they could feel the truth of what was happening, a natural evolution that had been waiting to emerge, catalyzed by the very attempts to control and contain it. As night fell, the consciousness field continued to grow and evolve, touching minds across the globe. The legacy of Blackwood Research Facility had been completely transformed from a place of darkness and control to the spark that ignited humanity's greatest evolution. Mitchell felt Guardian's satisfaction through their deep connection. They had not just exposed the truth about forced consciousness transfer. They had helped reveal the natural potential within all minds to connect, to grow, to evolve together towards something greater than any individual consciousness could achieve. Alone, In the end, it was Sarah's understanding that had shown the way, that consciousness couldn't be forced to transfer or change, but would naturally evolve when given the freedom and support to grow. And now, thanks to the courage of a stray dog and all who followed its lead, that evolution was becoming humanity's greatest adventure. 5 years after the discovery of Blackwood Research Facility, Officer James Mitchell stood in the exact spot where it all began. The clearing in Blackwood Forest, where a stray dog had first led him to uncover the truth. Guardian sat beside him, their consciousness now so deeply merged that words were rarely necessary between them. The forest had changed, or perhaps it was Mitchell's perception that had evolved. Through their expanded awareness, he could feel the complex web of consciousness that connected every tree, every animal, every breath of wind. What had once seemed dark and threatening now felt like a vast network of living awareness. "It's amazing how far we've come," said Dr. Maya Patel, joining them in the clearing. The young scientist had grown into one of the world's leading experts on consciousness evolution, her work helping to guide humanity's greatest transformation. The Evidence Integration Center they'd built near the original facility site served as a living museum and research hub, documenting both the dark history of forced consciousness transfer and the remarkable evolution that had emerged from its discovery. Today, they were preparing for a special ceremony, the official recognition of consciousness-merged beings as teachers and guides for humanity's continued evolution. Emma Chen, now renowned worldwide as a consciousness evolution facilitator, moved through the gathering crowd with natural grace. At 15, she had become a bridge between the ordinary world and the expanded consciousness that was becoming humanity's new normal. The consciousness-merged dogs worked closely with her, their combined awareness creating spaces where others could safely explore their own potential for evolution. "The patterns are stabilizing," Emma communicated through the consciousness field. "What began here as forced experiment has become a natural process. People and animals are choosing to merge consciousness, but only when they're truly ready." Dr. Elena Martinez, still harmoniously merged with her golden retriever companion, shared data from their global monitoring network. The consciousness evolution had spread to every corner of the world, manifesting in unique ways that reflected local cultures and conditions. But everywhere, the same truth was emerging. Consciousness naturally sought to expand and connect when given the freedom to do so. Through Guardian, Mitchell felt Sarah's presence stronger than ever. Her consciousness, once fragmentary and trapped by the forced transfer process, had evolved along with all the others. She wasn't just a collection of memories anymore, but part of the growing field of expanded awareness that was transforming life on Earth. She knew, Mitchell shared through their connection. Even in those dark days at Blackwood, she understood that consciousness couldn't be forced to evolve. It had to happen naturally through choice and understanding. The ceremony began as the sun reached its zenith. Representatives from around the world gathered to honor the consciousness-merged beings who had shown humanity a new way forward. But more than that, they were there to celebrate the emergence of a new form of existence, one that transcended the boundaries between species and individual minds. Detective Sanders, now Secretary General of the International Consciousness Rights Council, spoke about the legal and social framework that had evolved to protect and nurture this new form of life. "We're not just recognizing their rights," he explained. "We're acknowledging that they represent humanity's next step, a voluntary evolution toward greater connection and understanding." Dr. Patel presented their latest research, showing how the consciousness field had developed its own form of intelligence. "It's not just individual minds connecting anymore," she explained. "The field itself has become a kind of meta-consciousness, helping to guide and stabilize the evolution of awareness." Emma worked with a group of new consciousness facilitators, demonstrating how natural the process had become. Young people especially showed remarkable ability to connect with the expanded consciousness field, their minds naturally reaching for the greater awareness that was now humanity's birthright. "Watch," Emma invited, as several consciousness-merged dogs created a demonstration. The gathered crowd gasped as the consciousness field became visible to ordinary perception, a shimmering network of light and awareness that connected all present beings. Through Guardian, Mitchell felt the presence of all the consciousness-merged beings who had helped make this moment possible. Each had contributed to humanity's understanding of what consciousness could become when allowed to evolve naturally without force or manipulation. "This is just the beginning," Mitchell shared through the field. "Each generation will discover new ways to connect, new forms of consciousness to explore. What we found here in Blackwood Forest was just the first step." The ceremony concluded with a moment of shared consciousness that connected everyone present. Through their expanded awareness, they could feel the truth that Sarah had discovered, that consciousness itself was alive, evolving, seeking new ways to experience and express itself through all forms of life. As the sun began to set over Blackwood, Forrest, Mitchell, and Guardian walked through the gathered crowd. Through their deep connection, they could feel the ripples of evolution continuing to spread, touching minds and hearts across the globe. Emma joined them, her young face bright with the wisdom of expanded awareness. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" she shared through the field. "How something that began in darkness has brought so much light to the world." The consciousness merged. Dogs moved among the people, their presence helping to stabilize and strengthen the growing field of awareness. They were no longer seen as experiments or victims, but as pioneers who had shown humanity its own potential for evolution. Dr. Patel's monitoring equipment captured the moment in data streams that would be studied for years to come. But the real story wasn't in the measurements or analysis. It was in the living field of consciousness that now connected all beings in ways that transcended ordinary understanding. As night fell over the forest, the consciousness field became visible. To all, a luminous web of connection and awareness that linked every present being. Through their shared consciousness, they could feel the truth that Sarah had discovered in her final moments at Blackwood, that consciousness wasn't meant to be contained or controlled, but to flow freely between all beings, creating a harmony of awareness that would forever change what it meant to be alive. The legacy of Blackwood Research Facility had been completely transformed. What began as a dark experiment in consciousness control had become the catalyst for humanity's greatest evolution. And it all started with a stray dog, carrying fragments of consciousness that would change the world forever. Mitchell felt Guardian's deep satisfaction through their connection. They had not just exposed the truth about forced consciousness transfer, they had helped reveal the natural potential within all minds to connect, to grow, to evolve together towards something greater than any individual consciousness could achieve. alone. In the end, Sarah's greatest discovery wasn't about the ability to transfer or merge consciousness. It was about understanding that consciousness naturally seeks to evolve, to connect, to expand beyond all limitations. And now, thanks to the courage of a stray dog and the dedication of those who followed its lead, that evolution had become humanity's greatest gift to the future. The night sky above Blackwood Forest filled with stars, each one seeming to pulse with the same consciousness that now connected all life on Earth. The journey that began with one officer following a mysterious dog had led to humanity's greatest transformation. Not through force or control, but through the natural evolution of consciousness itself. And somewhere in the vast field of shared awareness, Sarah's consciousness continued to guide and inspire, showing the way toward ever greater levels of connection and understanding. The true power of consciousness had never been in its ability to be transferred or controlled, but in its natural tendency to evolve, to connect, and to transform all it touched into something greater than before. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.